I'm Bryn, and on Christmas my father forgot to invite me. He also tried to sell the ranch my mother left me. I found out because a stranger called me sweetheart and asked where to wire the money. When I confronted Dad, he smiled like I was a problem to be managed, not a daughter to be loved. He said, "It's just business," and for a second I almost believed him. Then my phone lit up with one word I never expected to save me. Sheriff. I used to think Christmas smelled like pine and cinnamon and the kind of warm quiet you only get when the world finally stops demanding things from you. Our ranch Juniper Ridge always felt like that. Even in winter, even when the pastures browned and the creek ran thin under a skin of ice, the place held its breath in a good way. Mom used to say the land remembered love after she died. The land remembered grief instead. My father, Glenn Hartley, didn't grieve like I did. I cried in the barn aisle with my cheek against the old mare's neck, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. Dad grieved in paperwork. He grieved by reorganizing. He grieved by turning every conversation into a ledger. "You're too emotional right now," he told me at the kitchen table a week after the funeral, sliding a stack of documents toward me as if they were a plate of food. "We'll handle the estate. You can sign when you're ready." I was 27, running my mother's ranch side by side with her for years, and still he spoke to me like I was 14 and asking for the car keys. The truth I didn't understand yet was that Dad didn't see Juniper Ridge as home. He saw it as leverage, and after Mom was gone, he decided leverage belonged to him. The first time I felt the shift was subtle, like a temperature drop you can't explain. Dad began showing up unannounced with his wife, Candace, a woman who wore shiny lipstick like armor and called me dear in the same tone you'd use for a dog that had chewed your shoes. Candace didn't grow up on a ranch. She grew up in a place where grass was something you paid landscapers for. She hated the smell of hay, hated the dust, hated the way the wind didn't care about her hair. She hated me most of all because I didn't pretend to be impressed by her. "You should consider selling," she said one afternoon, looking around our kitchen like she was inspecting an old motel room. "This is a lot of work for one girl." I was elbow deep in bread dough, trying to keep my hands busy, because grief had taught me that stillness could drown you. I looked up and smiled politely, the way women are trained to smile when they want to throw something. "One girl," I repeated. "I run this ranch. I've run it. Mom trained me." Dad didn't correct her. He just watched me with that flat, managerial stare, like he was taking notes. That winter rolled in hard, the kind of winter that makes every gate latch freeze and every truck start like it's doing you a favor. I threw myself into the routine. Feed at dawn, fences at midday, bookkeeping at night. The ranch kept me standing when grief tried to fold me in half. Then, a week before Christmas, the first cut happened. It came as an email from my father. Subject: Holiday plans, Bryn. It read, like my name was a formality, "Candace and I will be hosting Christmas dinner this year. It will be a smaller gathering. Given everything that's happened, it's probably best you keep to your own traditions. Take care. No, love you. No, we miss you." Not even a fake smiley face. I sat at my desk in the little office off the mudroom, staring at the screen until the words blurred. My throat tightened in that old familiar way, grief rising like a wave. But beneath it was something else. Humiliation. I called him immediately. It rang 4 times before he answered. "Dad," I tried to sound normal. I tried to sound like a daughter who wasn't being erased. "I got your email. Are you serious?" There was a pause, and I could hear Candace in the background, laughing at something on TV. "Bryn," Dad said, as if he were addressing a problem employee, "don't make this dramatic. My voice cracked, and I hated that it gave him power. "You're uninviting me from Christmas. My first Christmas without Mom. She wouldn't want you spiraling," he said, smoothly. My hands curled around the phone. "You don't get to use her like that," he sighed. "You've been difficult lately, emotional. Candace is trying to create a peaceful atmosphere." "Peaceful," I repeated. I almost laughed. "So the solution is to cut me out." "I'm not cutting you out," he snapped. And that was the first real emotion I'd heard from him in months. "I'm setting boundaries. You can't keep clinging to that ranch like it's some shrine." "It's my home," I said, quietly. "It's Mom's. It's an asset," he said, and then his voice softened in the way it always did right before he tried to manipulate me. "Listen, we can talk after the holidays. Don't ruin Christmas with this." Then he hung up. I sat there with the deadline in my ear, my chest tight, my eyes burning. Outside, snow drifted across the yard like the world was trying to erase footprints that night. I fed the animals in the dark, my headlamp cutting a narrow beam through falling snow. The barn was warm with breath and body heat. The horses shifted, impatient. The cattle lowed softly. They needed me, then that was the thing. Juniper Ridge didn't cut me out. The land didn't send emails. The animals didn't weaponize peace. So I went on. I told myself Christmas could be quiet. I told myself I didn't need my father's approval. Then the second cut happened. And it was not subtle. It was a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me, some ranch-born instinct, made me answer. Hello, hi there, a man said. His voice was thick with confidence, the kind men have when they assume the world bends for them. Is this Bryn Hartley? Yes, I said, wary. Well, Bryn, Merry Christmas to me, he chuckled. I just put an offer in on Juniper Ridge. Your daddy says you're out of the picture, but he wanted me to confirm wiring details with you since you're listed on some paperwork. For a moment, everything went silent except the faint hum of my refrigerator behind me. My daddy, I repeated. Glenn Hartley, the man said. We met yesterday. Hell of a deal. Ranch has got good bones. Needs modernization, but I'm paying cash. So my stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up right there on the kitchen floor. You're buying my ranch, I said. There was a pause. Yes. Look, sweetheart, I'm just trying to close before the new year. Your dad said you'd probably cause trouble. The word sweetheart scraped me raw. It made it easier to focus my shock into something sharp. My dad doesn't own my ranch, I said, slowly, each word like a nail. And you are not wiring anything to anyone until you send me the documents you've been given. The man huffed, annoyed. Lady, I send me the documents, I repeated, harder this time. Or you can explain to the state attorney why you participated in fraud. Silence. Then, fine. I'll email what I have. But if you're just trying to squeeze more money out. I hung up. My hands were shaking as I waited for the email. My mind sprinted, replaying every conversation, every paper Dad had slid across the table, every time Candace had suggested selling. When the email arrived, my vision, TUNNELED. It was a purchase agreement draft, and there, in black and white, were signatures. One was Dad's, the other was mine. Except it wasn't mine. It was a sloppy imitation, like someone had tried to copy my handwriting after seeing it once. My throat tightened. My skin went cold. He forged my signature. He forged me out of my own life. I called my friend and neighbor, Lila Mercer, the one person who had checked on me consistently since Mom died. Lila lived 2 miles down the road and ran her family's feed store in town. She had the kind of steady strength that didn't ask permission. She answered on the second ring. Hey, Bryn, you okay? No, I said, and the word came out as a broken laugh. No, I'm not. Lila, I think my dad is trying to sell my ranch. I have paperwork. He forged my signature. There was a pause, and then Lila's voice changed lower. Focused. Where are you? Kitchen. Please stay there, she said. I'm coming. And don't call your dad. Not yet. 20 minutes later, Lila stomped snow off her boots and sat across from me at the table, flipping through the printed pages with a face like stone. Bryn, she said softly, and her eyes flashed. He really did it. My chest felt hollow. I don't understand. Why would he? Money, Lila said, blunt. Control. Some mix of both. How much is the buyer offering? I named the number. Lila whistled low. Enough to make someone stupid, she said. Then she tapped the forged signature, but not smart enough. I looked up, confused. She met my eyes. We don't handle this like a family argument. We handle it like a crime, because it is. The word crime made my stomach twist. Dad was still Dad. He used to carry me on his shoulders at the county fair. He used to fix my bike chain with grease on his hands, but those memories felt like photos of a stranger now. I don't want to ruin him, I whispered, and I hated myself for still caring. Lila leaned forward. Bryn, he already tried to ruin you. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the ranch under a star-filled sky, my boots crunching in snow, my breath coming out in white clouds. Every fence post looked like a question mark. Every building looked like a memory that could be stolen. In the barn, I leaned my forehead against the wooden stall door and closed my eyes. Mom, I whispered into the dark. What do I do? The ranch didn't answer, but something inside me did. A quiet truth. I had spent my whole life trying to be the good daughter, hoping Dad would someday look at me and see what Mom saw. But good daughters get erased, so I decided to become something else. Daughters get erased, so I decided to become something else. The next morning, Lila drove me into town before the courthouse even opened. We went to the county clerk first, were the woman behind the counter, Marlin, who had known my mother and always gave me extra stamps when I mailed livestock paperwork, frowned at the documents. Honey, Marlene said, adjusting her glasses, this land is deeded to you. Always has been, since your mom filed that trust. Your father's name isn't on it. Relief hit me so hard my knees wobbled. But, Marlene added, that doesn't mean he can't cause a mess if he's using forged documents to trick someone. Lila nodded. We need to stop this before it closes. Marlene's frown deepened. Then you need the sheriff and a lawyer. The word lawyer made my wallet flinch, but Lila squeezed my shoulder. I know someone, she said. By noon, I was sitting in a small office with a woman named Joanna Reed, a local attorney with kind eyes and a voice that didn't waste time. Joanna read the documents, then looked up at me. This is forgery, she said calmly, and attempted fraud. Your father's intent seems clear. My throat tightened. He's my dad. Joanna's gaze didn't soften in pity. It sharpened in respect. Then he should have acted like one. She explained my options, but I already knew what mattered most. Stop the sale. Protect the ranch. Make sure he couldn't try again. Joanna made a few calls, her fingers moving quickly across her keyboard. Then she handed me her phone. Sheriff Daniel Kraus, she said. He's expecting you. My heart pounded as I lifted the phone. Sheriff Kraus had been around forever. He'd once pulled a drunk driver out of our ditch and apologized to Mom for the inconvenience like it was her fault for living near a road. He was the kind of man who believed in order, but also in decency. The line clicked. Cross, Sheriff, I said, and my voice shook despite my effort. This is Bryn Hartley. My father, Glenn Hartley, is trying to sell my ranch using forged documents. I have proof. There was a beat of silence. Then, in a voice that turned my fear into something steadier, he said, all right, I'm listening. I told him everything. The email, the buyer, the forged signature, the trust. When I finished, Sheriff Cross exhaled through his nose. That's a serious allegation. I know, I whispered, but it's true. Bring the documents, he said. And Bryn, don't confront him yourself. I swallowed. Okay. When I hung up, my hands were damp. Joanna gave me a firm nod. You did the right thing. Did I? It didn't feel right. It felt like stepping off a cliff and hoping the ground would catch me. Christmas Eve arrived like a judgment day. The town was all twinkle lights and cheerful music, but my insides were a storm. Dad and Candace were hosting their small gathering, which I had not been invited to, and apparently, they were also planning to sign away my home. Joanna learned the closing was set for that afternoon at a title company in town. The buyer's name was Grant Harlow, a developer from out of county with slick hair and a reputation for turning farmland into luxury estates. When I heard his name, something bitter rose in me. Juniper Ridge wasn't a commodity. It was my mother's hands in the soil. It was my childhood in the creek. It was every sunrise that had kept me alive. I drove into town alone, my truck tires spitting slush, my knuckles white on the wheel. Leela followed behind in her own car. Like backup I didn't deserve but desperately needed. Inside the title company, everything smelled like stale coffee and fake plants. A receptionist smiled at me like this was any normal day. Dad sat in a conference room with Candace beside him, her nails manicured, her lipstick perfect. Across from them sat Grant Harlow, leaning back like he already owned the place. Dad looked up when I stepped in. For half a second, something like annoyance crossed his face. Then, he smoothed it into a smile. Bryn, he said, surprised in the way people act when they're caught but still want to pretend they're in control. This isn't appropriate. Candace's eyes flicked over me like I was a stain. Oh, for heaven's sake, Grant grinned. Well, look who decided to show. My voice felt too loud in the sterile room. You forged my signature. Dad's smile tightened. Don't do this here. Where should I do it? I snapped. My cheeks burned. On your peaceful Christmas dinner table, while you serve Candace's dry ham and pretend I don't exist. Candace gasped like I'd slapped her. Dad's eyes narrowed. Watch your mouth. I laughed, sharp and humorless. Or what? You'll cut me out again. Grant cleared his throat. Look, I don't have time for family drama. Glenn assured me he lied, I said, turning to Grant. He doesn't own Juniper Ridge, and the signature on your paperwork is fake. Grant's grin faded. That's not. The door opened behind me. A calm voice filled the room. Actually, it is. Sheriff Daniel Cross stepped in, hat in hand, his presence shifting the air like weather moving in. Two deputies stood behind him. The receptionist peeked around the corner, her smile long gone. Dad's face went pale. Candace's hand flew to her throat. Daniel, what is this? Sheriff Cross didn't look at her. His eyes were on my father, Glenn Hartley. He said, measured, "We have reason to believe you attempted to transfer property you do not own using forged documents." Dad stood up, his chair scraping. "This is a misunderstanding." Sheriff Cross glanced at me. "Bryn, do you have the originals?" My hands shook as I pulled the folder from my bag and slid it across the table. Joanna had told me not to speak more than necessary. Let the evidence talk. Sheriff Cross opened the folder, examined the deed and trust paperwork, then compared it to the closing documents. Grant leaned forward, suddenly less confident. "Hold on. If this is fake," Sheriff Cross looked at him, "then you've been misled. You should consult your attorney. Right now, this sale is not proceeding." Grant's face hardened. He shot Dad a glare. "Glenn, what the hell?" Dad's jaw clenched. "I was acting in the family's best interest. My best interest," I whispered, and my voice broke. I hated that it still hurt. "You didn't even invite me to Christmas." Dad's eyes flickered, just once. "You've been unstable." Sheriff Cross's expression tightened. "Enough." He turned back to Dad. "Glenn, I'm going to ask you to come with me." Candace stood abruptly. "You can't arrest him. This is family." Sheriff Cross's gaze finally met hers, and it was colder than winter. "Ma'am, forgery isn't family. It's a felony." Dad's shoulders stiffened. For the first time, he looked small, not the powerful man who could rewrite my life with paperwork, just a man who'd been caught. He glanced at me, and there was something like pleading in his eyes, as if he expected me to save him from the consequences he'd chosen. For a heartbeat, my old self, the girl who wanted her father's love, rose up. Then I remembered the email, the erasure, the forged signature. I didn't move. Sheriff Cross gently took Dad's arm and guided him toward the door. Dad didn't fight. He just walked like a man, stepping into a future he never planned for. Candace started crying, loudly, as if tears could rewrite law. Grant gathered his documents with trembling hands and left, without looking at me again. When the room finally emptied, I sat down hard in the chair Dad had abandoned. My legs felt like they'd forgotten how to hold me. Lila stepped in from the hallway and wrapped her arms around me. I didn't cry at first. My body didn't know what emotion belonged where anymore. Then I did, quietly, into Lila's shoulder. Not because I'd won, but because something inside me had finally stopped begging. Outside, snow started falling again, soft and steady, like the world was trying to cover the ugliness with something clean. The legal process took weeks. There were statements and court dates, and the kind of small-town whispers that follow you into grocery aisles. Some people looked at me like I'd betrayed my father. Others looked at me like they finally understood what he'd been all along. Sheriff Cross called me after the first hearing. "You holding up?" "I don't know," I admitted. He paused. "For what it's worth, your mother would be proud. You stood up for yourself." The words hit me in the chest like a warm hand. When Christmas finally came, the actual day, I spent it at the ranch. I made coffee and watched the sunrise turn the snow pink. I fed the horses and talked to them like they were old friends. In the afternoon, Lila came over with a casserole and her teenage son, Wyatt, who pretended he wasn't excited to be around the horses but absolutely was. We ate at my kitchen table, laughter spilling into corners that had been silent for too long. At one point, Lila glanced around and said softly, "This place feels like it's breathing again." I swallowed hard. It does. Later that night, after they left, I stood on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, listening to the quiet. I thought about my father sitting somewhere without the ranch, without the power, maybe without the story he'd told himself about being the hero. I thought about Candace and her lipstick armor, and I realized something that surprised me. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free, because revenge isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's something quieter. Sometimes it's simply refusing to be erased. Sometimes it's letting the truth make the call, and letting the law answer. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who should have protected you, if you've ever been told you're too emotional when you were just telling the truth, I want you to remember this. You're not wrong for defending your life. You're not cruel for setting boundaries, and you are not obligated to shrink so millennials can feel powerful. If this story hit you in the heart, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, because you never know who needs to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival.